So I'm starting off with this black and white photograph because it allows me to see the values very clearly. I'm not influenced by rich color or any saturation. I'm only seeing the tone of something. In charcoal, we're working with basically, if you're using black charcoal, a black medium, unlike paint, where you can mix a variety of values from light gray to a dark gray. If you're working in pastel, you do have that option of working with different values of pastel. But if you're working with charcoal, the way you're going to get a lighter color is to use less pressure and to apply it more gradually and delicately to establish your grays. So in essence, that's what I've done here in this area, just kind of blocking in some large area. Now, everything is relative. It's like, well, what about the background? What value am I going to make that background? I'm not going to put in all those details that's in that background. I'm going to keep it very simple, but what I do want to do is put in some value. And I think I want it lighter than her hair, not as light as her jacket. Somewhere actually probably around the value I have already. So I'm going to put that in. And it's just, I want to have something in there just to establish some relationships. A range of value. And I think I can get darker still. Pretty dark, and of course, I think I want to go even darker. And I'm noticing and looking at the photograph as I do this, I'm evaluating the overall grays of her hair. So I think I want to make sure I add some of those other grays elsewhere to the piece. And build them up. I'm not really concerned with a lot of detail because I know the overall range of the grays are here very dark. There's no real light colors, so I'm just going to be building this area up. And depending on the charcoal you're using, you can pull lights out with a kneaded eraser. Softer edges are nice. It just feels more natural. Not these hard defined edges. They just don't feel natural. And it'll take your regular charcoal, this will take a much longer time to do this. You'll have to be very patient and methodical about it. And what you can do a couple different ways using traditional charcoal is you can grind some into a powder and apply it with a cotton swab, with a Kleenex, with cloth, with a chamois, with your fingers. Lots of different ways to approach it. And the other is like, the hair is going to look really odd without having any tone in the face. So I do want to establish some tone in the face. Otherwise, it's just going to look really awkward. So I'll just put some tone in there. at this point, I would start to build up the darks in other areas of the piece. And we'll be looking for those. And we have some darks over here. Transitions kind of get softer as it gets to the edge here. Some pretty rich darks in this area. Notice that I fill these in, that contrast between the darkest dark gets diminished. I'll just go over it a bit more and increase the contrast. Just kind of building it up. Do the same on the other side. Need to get a little bigger. Always keeping my eye on what I'm drawing versus where my hand is. I want to be able to really keep my eye focused on what my resource is, my model, and not get overly focused on what my hand is doing. This over here, this area right here, that's a dark gray. If I had to guess, it's probably this gray right here. And where is it? It's like its placement, right? Somewhere it's right around here. So what I think I'll do is I'll just throw in a little dark in this area just to help me. And I'm going to bring in some more darks. And I'm going to try something. Set my brush to multiply. And see how that impacts my application. I'm hoping it'll be more true to traditional media. Okay. So I'm a little too low there. It's kind of right here where this meets here. So let's see right about here. Try to look for large blocks of value. Don't get overly focused on big details. At one point, you think you got as dark as you can, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't get darker. Wow. That's why it's important to key your piece. And let's put another dark, which is at the tail end here. Well, that multiply is really working. Great. I'm going to go back to normal. And we have another curve of slight value here. So I'm just going to put it in kind of gently, just to kind of give myself some bearings. And this comes down a bit more. And I often like to squint just to see things in high contrast, kind of eliminates subtle details. Got some darker darks here. Let's just do a quick zoom out. Let's just see how it's coming together. You see gradually building things up, starting to get there. And you may be wondering, what about some of these little details, like right in here? How do we capture that in all these little fine strands? I would not focus on them. And of course, every person's hair has a slightly different texture and quality, depending on the curliness and all the other aspects of people's hair and the color and tone, but how long it is, how short it is, lots of things. So it's a learning process. Let's take a look at the whole again. It's like, okay, it's starting to build up on the right side. You can clearly see the other side is going to need to get darker as well. And right now, I think I'll just, for the demonstration purposes, I'll focus on this one area so you could see it develop. And I'm going to be darkening some of these areas here. How's my opacity? A little too low. And at some point, I do want to start, moving my pencil into the direction of the flow. And I'm using what some would consider the broad point of charcoal. It's like applying it so that the charcoal point isn't touching the paper, but the wide area of the charcoal is. And there's going to be different edge qualities. It's like suddenly there's a little bit of a lighter strand of hair in some of these areas here. So how I compress that transition will make it stand out. And the other option is to pull things out with a kneaded eraser. And you can sculpt your kneaded eraser. Let's click, somebody puts in the chat. Okay, and hi chat. So for instance, I'm going to pull out a light. As if this were an eraser. And I could pull out a light in some other areas too. That's a little more true to us, to something that blends and smears. Okay. And then once I've softened some of these areas, I can come back in and strengthen some of the definition. Pull out some of the lights here. The one thing about when you blend things, it does even things out a bit, and that's to your advantage. Then you could always come back in and pop in those darks. So let me talk about this area in our hair right here. So we have what we call a lighter value, or this like, whoops, this lighter value here. And it's too close. And then of course, in the indentation, there's a lighter value. You have both. So you do want to capture that. And I'm looking out, where else do I need some value? Just to make some adjustments. This has to come down lower. This area needs to come down lower. And pull up as well. I'm aware of the curve, so I'm going to kind of push and pull in those directions to kind of strengthen some of that movement and flow of the hair. Following the flow of the hair with my hand. Always paying attention to the image on the right. And at some point, I'm going to have some room for more detail. And that's where I'll be a little more precise. Notice I have the real rich darks over here, which I haven't established. So I want to put those in a little bit more clearly. And this is more interconnected, so I need to connect that better. If anything, I went a little too far out in this area. I want a soft edge, not a hard edge there. Build those up, you wouldn't want to put all these little details in early. You need to establish the other values in the large masses first. If we put in all these little subtle details, they don't have context. The context of the overall values that establish the whole of the hair versus all these subtle little details. See, it's starting to build up volume and solidity and dimension when I add more values. So I think that's a good place to stop.